What is a Bitcoin? Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Alex Svetski, do you want to give us a little background on yourself?
Yo, well, Alex McShane, thank you for having me on. Dude, I love the fact that you're like dressed in black and the background's black. All I can see is like your head just hanging
Oh
out.
no.
It's hilarious.
You see, dude, I just built this. Like I'm putting together the studio, so I'm trying to figure out life and like everything. But yeah, I guess I'm probably just a floating head.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's like the opposite of Gigi. or at least in the realm of Gigi. So that's a good thing. Really quick overview then. I run a company called Amber. That's sort of my core business, my core thing. And Amber is, as I like to generally put it, the first Bitcoin only DCA app in the world. We started off in Australia, and now we're rolling out in the US. And I guess one of the differences between sort of Amber and the other things on the market is like we're purely mobile first. And we've got all sorts of cool automations. So, you don't just, instant buy, sell or DCA, but you can also do things like auto by the dip. And we're going to be releasing by the shift soon. So every time Peter Schiff tweets about Bitcoin, it'll buy some Bitcoin. So yeah, there's it's a more gamified, more automated version of stacking and accumulating Bitcoin. That's like the whole game here. So that's sort of my core thing. And then other than that, yeah, I do quite a bit of writing, and I run a little podcast called the Wake Up Podcast, which is supposed to like slap people awake. It's my opportunity to rant.
Yeah, it's a great show.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the writing. Did you start this before Amber or well after, or when did you start writing?
Dude, it's funny that you asked that actually, because I was on the plane today flying in from Dominican Republic, and there was no internet on the plane. So I was like going through, and usually I try and make my plane time as effective as possible. So I'll either read, I'll either write, or if I can get internet, I'll do some work, right? So there's no internet, so I couldn't really do any work. I did a bunch of reading on this method of basically organizing a business, organizing a company. It's called organizational physics, which my head of operations passed over to me because we're about to start growing the organization. So I did a bit of reading on that. And then I took some time to just like organize my random files that are all over the place, so that way everything's in a particular place so I can find it later. And as I was going through my notes, as a young kid, I'm talking notes back to like 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011. And I did a lot of writing back then, but it was all private. Nothing was ever public. Like the first time I think I publicly wrote was in 2016, and it was more about like startup writing. So if someone goes and scrolls back through my Medium and goes to like the early articles, they'll see them more about running a startup and the trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur and a founder and all that sort of stuff. And you kind of see how my writing evolves over time. You'll notice where I sort of caught the Bitcoin bug. You'll notice where I climbed Mount Stupid and started talking a little bit about blockchain and crypto, and then that sort of quickly changed to Bitcoin. And then the writing was more philosophical and nice and like open and placid and sort of thing. It was still relatively deep-ish, but it was quite accessible. And then my writing just got sharper and sharper and sharper. So it went from like being a something people love to read, to learn about like Bitcoin through an anthropological sense, to like a baseball bat to the head, which is what my writing is more so like today. So it was really fascinating to it's fascinating to see that evolution. But for me personally, it was fascinating today on the plane. Like I read some of my old stuff from 2010, 2011. I was like a punk ass early 20-year-old kid. And I was reading that. I was like, holy crap. It's like there was some interesting stuff. I mean, if you like, I can read like a couple random verses for you.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's see what we got in here. So I've got from November the 13th sorry, yeah, November the 13th, 2011. So that is like literally 10 years ago, give or take 2 weeks. So in here, I opened it with like one of my staff's girlfriends at the time had snapped her back and became a fucking paraplegic. It was wild. And I write here, like, I cannot begin to fathom the depth of pain, my friend would currently be experiencing. In life, we learn powerful lessons from such a profound occurrence. I begin to appreciate life more. The ability we have to function properly from a physical point of reference is a gift that we do not cherish enough. It's at times like this when no matter how hard you wish it was a dream or a nightmare, no matter how hard you wish you could press reset, that you get the sinking feeling that there's nothing you can do. That feeling of powerlessness eats away at our soul and we yearn to have a second chance. The lesson: cherish your one and only chance. Appreciate things like they are the only opportunity you will have to experience them. As James Dean said, dream as if you'll live forever, live as if you'll die today. So stop for a moment and appreciate life. If you can breathe, move, speak, see, touch, taste, hear, and smell, then you have all you need to experience in life. So anyway, it was just sort of interesting, the kind of anecdotes, and I get like super fucking philosophical at points. So yeah, to answer your question, seems like I've been writing a long time, man. But only publicly recently.
Yeah, there's parts of your current writing in there. It kind of reads like, or sounds like a daily devotional, kind of like inspiring. There's like religious overtones. So where does that come from? Do you have a religious background or?
Not really, man. So I guess I grew up in a religious family, like Macedonian Orthodox, which is similar to Russian Orthodox, for example. But I wasn't ever like, I didn't do Bible studies. I didn't do any of that because back in school we had there was I think they called it Bible studies or religion classes or whatever back in primary school, but they were sort of like so Anglo-Saxon that they didn't understand what Macedonian Orthodox was. So they put me and my brother in the non-scripture class, as if we didn't have a Christian sort of based religion because all the stuff was Christian. So I missed out on all of that stuff. I had this kind of faith thing, in a sense, imposed upon me by my grandmother, who was extraordinarily religious, just kind of those classic Eastern European homes, with like pictures of Mother Mary and Jesus and all this sort of shit everywhere. And, they'd be lighting candles and all this sort of stuff. And, I got christened, but I never really took a moment to actually study the Bible or Christianity or anything like that. And then kind of when I turned 17, 18, my pendulum swung the entirely opposite way because I had become sick of the overbearingness of my uncle, my grandmother, and that component of the family, because I left home quite young. And I was living with them for a little bit. And yeah, I just started questioning the notion of God. I was like, what the fuck is this God thing? Why is my grandmother such a slave to like, all of these belief systems and this dogma and these superstitions that keep her inside this fucking box, right? And I broke free of a lot of that stuff, and the pendulum swung really heavily in the opposite direction. And I was the first one in my family to like, I remember my brother and sister who were younger than me, they were like, what do you mean you don't believe in God? How can you do that? What's going to happen to you? And everyone was freaking out. And I was, quite a renegade in that sense, because it was just inconceivable in my family. Not that we were taught anything in the Bible necessarily, but more so that it was just ingrained in us from childhood that there was a God, there was an authority, there was, a religion that you must have a belief in and all of this stuff. And it was that period of my life where, I started like really broadening my idea base. So I would read philosophy, I would read the occult. I read some wacky shit, man. Like, I used to have, just for fun, on my bookshelf, I had the Satanic Bible next to the Holy Bible, just to fuck with people. Be like, man, what's going on here? most people, when they hear the word the Satanic Bible, they freak the fuck out. They're like, holy shit, this guy's, wants to drink the blood of babies and all that sort of stuff. And that's like totally not what it's about. Like the book itself, it's almost like a self-help book. The doctrine of Satanism, as the guy's name, it was Anton Sandor LaVey or something like that. He was it was about personal responsibility, basically. It was about, removing this idea that there's some, magnificent authority that tells you what you can and cannot do and what's moral, et cetera, et cetera. It's like to find personal responsibility and to take advantage of life based on being like a stronger individual. That's kind of the rough thesis. And what happened with him was quite interesting. Was he was like a choir boy, and I think he was a pianist at the local church, and he would play there on the weekends. But he would also play during the week at the carnival, at the circus. I think his dad was one of the organizers there, or held a booth there, or whatever. And what he said was it was the hypocrisy that made him disillusioned with Christianity, seeing the same people with their wives and children in church on the Sunday, being the same guys chasing women and fornicating and drinking and doing all of the stuff on the other 6 days. And he became disillusioned with the church and decided to create his own church. And I guess the Church of Satan being a rebuke to the idea of, a supposedly all-seeing, all-knowing God, and being one of, the individual responsibility. So it was an interesting period of my life, because it really made me into kind of like an avid individualist. And anyway, throughout the years, like obviously reading and studying and learning and all sorts of different things have been a big part of my life. I think probably my mid-20s mostly went into entrepreneurial type books and biographies. So, I read everything from, Steve Jobs, from Branson to, Ben Horowitz, Hard Thing About Hard Things, and like 0 to 1 and Peter Thiel. And that was sort of like a big part of that, early to mid 20s, Arnold's autobiography, all that sort of stuff, like basically great stories, great heroes, people that have done big things. And it wasn't really until I started digging back into psychology, a bit of I guess exposure from Tony Robbins, and then really Jordan Peterson's work and how he frames Christianity as a framework for morality and principled living, that it started to like really, I guess, embed itself again in me. And the more mature I've become, the more I've appreciated the principles that belie the original teachings of, Christ and Christianity and what's in the Bibles. And I actually had this conversation with my girlfriend the other day, because she's sort of earlier on in that journey, had grown up extremely Catholic, had sort of rebuked, had, sort of is still going through that journey. And I was trying to help her separate, like I talked about this framework, which was, you've got the philosophy and the principles of Christianity, then you have the interpretations of the philosophy of the principles, which might be Catholicism, Protestantism, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, you have a third layer, which is actually the institutionalization of the interpretation of the philosophy. And the cancer exists in the institutionalization of it. It's fine for people to have different preferences, and it's fine for those different preferences and perspectives to coalesce and become different sects, quote unquote, because they're based on different interpretation. That's all fine. People can do that. Where it gets dangerous is when it becomes a institutionalized tool, which, some group of parasites use to extract wealth, or use guilt as a mechanism for, driving people in a particular direction, etc. So, I think it was a lot of me becoming a little bit more mature, and I guess becoming a Bitcoiner and really digging into first principles thinking and Jordan Peterson's work, which echoed a lot of the idea of, personal responsibility and Western values and Christian values, and all of that sort of weaved together. Plus a lot of that's probably in my 20s, a lot of stuff actually was Alan Watts, Lao Tzu. I did a lot of, read all of Robert Greene's books, Art of War, Machiavelli, like all that sort of stuff as well. So principles across all of those things kind of weave together. And yeah, here I am today, I think, hopefully a little bit wiser, and able to appreciate the breadth and the nuance across all of these things.
Yeah, you can really fast forward your life experiences through reading. I'm an avid reader as well. Really enjoyed some of the titles you mentioned and the authors. So I have a question. Where on this scale of, so, Christianity obviously kind of looks up and out towards God, as you mentioned. Satanism is like kind of like hedonistic, like self sufficient, maybe religion, or pointing inward at the self, looking for responsibility. Where do, if at all, people who hold Bitcoin tend to fall in your experience, or what would a quote unquote Bitcoiner's outlook on the universe be?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one, because I think it's a very nuanced position for Bitcoiners. I think this is why I personally these days is I don't specifically identify myself as either ANCAP or libertarian or religious or atheist or any of these sorts of things. It's like Bitcoiner, and the Bitcoin position is quite nuanced, because it does place the individual at the center. But as I kind of wrote in that recent piece that I did, Bitcoiners and Citadels, like there's this idea of a tribe of people coming together along common values, which is quite important. So it's like because the individual is nothing without the tribe. I mean, you can be Robinson Crusoe if you really, really want to, but the whole point of civilization and society is that there is some sort of interpersonal relationships, collaboration, cooperation. And in order to do that, you need to have, I guess, some framework through which to, understand morality and behavior, and be able to interact with each other. So that's where things like, I guess, religion help. And I think maybe a good way to answer this one is probably through the lens of something like spiral dynamics. I don't know if you listened to the pod that I did with Michael Krieger.
Not yet.
Yeah, okay. So this one, we kind of dived into this model of understanding the world and understanding values frameworks called spiral dynamics. And that was it was introduced to the world by a guy called Clare Graves. He was around Abraham Maslow's time. And then it was built on by a guy called Don Beck, and more recently Ken Wilber. And the idea is that consciousness at an individual and a collective level evolves in layers. And the layers of the spiral effectively are encoded in colors. So you've got sort of beige at the base level, then purple, red, blue, orange, green, etc. Up the spiral basically, and each one comes with particular goals, and it's either more egocentric or more ethnocentric. The sort of the pendulum swings between each of them. So beige, the goal is survival, and it is a consciousness level that we all experience basically when we're born and we're a fucking 1-year-old, because we don't perceive anything else in the world. All we need to do is survive. So it's like food, gimme.
Like
and
high time preference at that level.
Basically, high time preference. It's purely survival. It is
limbic, kind of like.
Yep, limbic, absolutely. And it's mostly representative in like sort of early childhood as a baby, and then also towards the end as a decaying, aging person. But then people sort of can fall into that mode when they're stressed or freaked out or anxious, or not behaving rationally, for example. So when you see people fucking freaking the hell out, I saw that. I mean, I don't know what the fuck's happening with Dave Chappelle. I heard there's something, but I saw some video of some guy, and he came there to like be, I don't know, pro Dave Chappelle or something. And there's this fucking crazy bitch just screaming at him with her sign. I was like, fucking holy shit. Some people take things way too seriously, right? So that's an example of someone falling into their beige, right? Very low level, limbic, basically unconscious consciousness, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of fighting, like very primal, Like you actually like
Mhm.
gotta turn off the frontal lobes and just you're
Mhm.
acting on instinct. Like,
Very much, very much, very much.
yeah.
And the second level is very similar actually. But all it is it's the goal is still survival, but it's done in a tribe. So it's more a tribal version of survival. So purple is like, you might find it in early tribes that are hunter gatherers, and that, let's say they dropped a rock and it started raining, so now they think that dropping a rock brings the rain, so they all start to drop rocks and they create the rain dance, to sort of bring that about. And it's like they're at effect of the environment. There's like everything out there is out to get them, so they sort of band together to increase their chances of survival. So early man was very much like that, arguably speaking. I mean, we weren't back there, so we don't know exactly, but you get that in gangs, for example. You get that in the way young kids sort of play together and they pick on the weird one, but they sort of like gang up together and all this sort of stuff. So that's sort of purple. Then out of purple emerges red. Red is the power god, and that's the kind of archetype. It's someone emerges from the group and realizes that everyone's sort of afraid of things and is effectively looking for security, safety, or protection. And one person emerges and uses kind of force or an overbearing capacity or charisma or whatever to enforce rule and order and function and process. And that's like the archetypes of that are the early, like your Genghis Khans or your Attila the Huns or Alexander the Great or whatever you want to sort of frame. It's like the early conquerors and emperors and things like that represented the red archetype quite well. And out of red, I might also say, like today, you see red in rock stars or MMA fighters, or Conor McGregor is a good red. You know what I mean? He exemplifies that kind of thing. He's also quite orange, and I'll explain what orange means in a second. But out of red emerges blue, and blue is process, systems, structure. It is a framework. It is rules oriented, and you see that the first kind of emergences of that were things like Hammurabi and Babylon, right? Or early religions. And in fact, all religions really are blue in nature because they're a form of rules and process and orientation. In the modern day, blue is exemplified by the state government, process, police, the legal system, etc. It is all about rule, law, order by a collective. So what you'll note is, beige was sort of, remember, egocentric, individual, then purple, group, red back to individual, purple back to group. And each of these, and I said this to Mike when we did the podcast together, is like each of them come with a light and a shadow form. You know what I mean? Like so red in an appropriate context is the man, the alpha male who protects his woman, right? From some fucking retard trying to touch her, right? Or the fireman who fucking charges in and saves the kid from the burning house, right? That is red. In its shadow, it is the husband that beats the shit out of his wife. It is the emperor or the oppressive. It's the Hitler, for example, right? So each of them have their place. Blue in its positive form is good. It's discipline, right? It's something like Jocko Willink might talk about. Is if you set a regime, a process, or a routine, a discipline, you can actually perform. It's the getting up at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock every single morning to go and train because you have a system, you have a process. It's the structure, it's the organization in a business. It is the original incarnation of the Constitution of America, right? Before it got deranged and infected with shit. It is the Bitcoin Constitution. So, they all have their light and dark, which I must add that as a disclaimer. So anyway, out of blue, orange emerges, and orange is like sort of renegade entrepreneur, achievement, science, break the rules and, don't just stay within the construct, but, what could something mean, hypothesis and, real out there thinking. And that was mostly exemplified by, entrepreneurs and scientists. So like an Einstein would be a great orange. Steve Jobs would be a fucking incredible orange. People like that were really people who were able to break out of the construct. So each kind of layer goes up. Then there's green, which is more egalitarian. We're all connected. We're all blah, 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 one, etc. Then yellow is an integration of all of them. And then, turquoise is some sort of, oneness with the world, maybe like a Buddha or some shit like that, or Jesus. Now, without getting too far into that, if people want to know more about it, I recommend going to listen to the Spiral Dynamics podcast me and Michael Krieger did. There's a lot more depth in there. But that's sort of my long way of answering your question about where Bitcoiners are, is that what I've come to realize, and I think Bitcoiners, even without knowing this framework of viewing the world through these sort of values hierarchies, or these values, this spiral of integrated value types or archetypes, is that, religion and the idea of Christianity forms an important layer in there. Like, it does form the blue layer. It's not the be all and end all, but it's a critical component. And I think what happens is most people, and we've seen the damage of this in the last couple of years, is in the absence of religion and the faith in a higher power, we replace it with a faith in the higher power of fucking Fauci or masks or whatever other stupidity, right? Like, it'll always exist. The question is in what shade, is it a dark shade or is it a light shade? And I think a lot of Bitcoiners, quite rightly, would prefer to integrate that blue in themselves and in society with the idea of, a Christian set of morality and values and structure, which I think is way better than filling it with the false morality of the fucking state, right? So in that context, I think it definitely has its place. And for me personally, whilst I'm not quote unquote Christian, I can deeply respect that form of thinking, morality, and framework.
All right, Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about our newest sponsor. This show is brought to you by Ledn.io. I have been super, super impressed with the guys over at Ledn. I've actually known the co-founders, Adam and Mauricio, for a very long time. I've had the pleasure to watch them build Ledn up from a tiny, tiny startup to now a super impressive institutional grade Bitcoin and crypto lender. Y'all, I'm so impressed with these guys. They are offering some of the best rates out there. I don't think anyone even comes close to touching them. You can get 6.1% APY on your first 2 Bitcoin that you deposit into Ledn interest accounts, and you can get 8.5% on USDC deposits. I mean, I know all the competitors. They're not even close. If you're going to put your crypto and your Bitcoin into an interest account, Ledn is by far the best. And on top of that, like I said, these guys are hardcore Bitcoiners, and they know the products and the services that Bitcoiners want and appreciate. They come up with B2X. It allows you to put your Bitcoin in, they leverage it up, and you can, with one click of the mouse, get twice the exposure to Bitcoin. So if you're super bullish, Ledn has you covered with a super, super easy way to get leverage with B2X. And then on top of that, they know that Bitcoiners care about your reserves. They know that Bitcoiners don't like under reserved and not full reserved financial institutions. So they are pushing the frontier in transparency in the digital asset lending space. And they are the first digital asset lender to do a full proof of reserves and proof of attestation through a Mariano LLC, a public accounting firm. So the Ledn guys, they know what Bitcoiners like. They are legit. I encourage you guys to check them out. Do your own research and go to Ledn.io. That is LEDN.io and learn more.
Yo, what is going on, plebs? We're going to take a break from our programming to tell you about the resurrection of our print magazine, starting with the El Salvador issue. Starting this fall, Bitcoin Magazine will be available on newsstands nationwide and at retail stores such as Barnes and Noble. Don't want to get off your couch though? No problem. You can also go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com. So skip the line and get each issue shipped directly to your front door with our annual subscription. I'm talking 4 issues a year that contain exclusive interviews and profiles with leading Bitcoiners, actionable insights on the state of the market, breaking news and cultural trends, along with powerful photos and artwork from the best artists in the world. Subscribe today and get 21% off using code podcast at checkout. That's PODCAST podcast at checkout.
So there's a blue within all of us, basically a layer that is waiting to be led in some capacity, just a little, maybe, you know, that wants to be instructed or have something to look up to.
Well, correct, because here's the thing, we can't know everything at all times, right? So it's like always the example I always use is kind of the master and the apprentice, right? We're all masters in some capacity in our own dimensions, but we're also apprentices across many, many other dimensions. And I think one of the big problems of today's day and age is you've got these fucking morons who think that they're, you know, a master in one domain and they should by definition then be endowed with, you know, mastery across every domain. It's like, no, fuck off. Like, you know, Bill Gates might have known how to do a deal to, like, you know, take one piece of software and, you know, get it plugged into everyone's computers. But just because you're a good fucking deal maker in that sense, doesn't mean you know anything about fucking eating or breathing or my health or anything like that. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, just on a side note, what is up with Bill Gates, man? Yeah, this guy wanted to shoot a missile of dust at the sun to stop global warming. I mean, he's out of his stone, mad.
That's what I mean. But that's what I mean is like these idiots that they think they're you know, they can just, they've achieved some level of success across one domain and they think they can just arbitrarily apply that their perceived authority from one domain across every other domain, irrespective of the consequences to others. Like, it is categorically true that I know more about health than Bill Gates does, because the results speak for themselves. Put me next to Bill Gates and we'll see who's fucking healthier. Likewise with you, likewise with many others. But apparently he knows fucking better. It's the fucking dumbest shit ever. So anyway, that's I mean, I've got a theory about Bill Gates, you know, in terms of how he devolved into such a retard, but
yeah, I think it's an interesting trap that you know, everyone has to guard against, because we're all walking around with the power to disseminate our message, you know, our beliefs or lack of message to more or less like everyone on earth at any moment, you know. You know, something really crazy happened during this interview, you'd be everywhere. Like maybe something you say in it will catch on, it'll be everywhere. Like in any case, like that's the great hope, right? We're continuously recording and broadcasting ourselves because we want to be in everyone's ears. So I think like two things happened. Like you get like this kind of time crunch. Actually, you see this with Bitcoin podcasters and or you know, any Bitcoiners making content. Like bear market comes, what are you going to talk about? No one's there for the Bitcoin anymore. And so like the question becomes whether and to what extent you allow yourself with wiggle room to go into your other interests. So how do you manage that, being such a vocal and a kind of like public space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm personally, I mean, I like to broadcast my message, but I guess if my early writings say anything, is that I'm a fucking weirdo anyway, and I just write to myself. So I just like decided to, instead of just saving it on my computer, I just like, you know, write it for everyone. And if someone reads it, great. If someone doesn't, whatever, I don't care. So like for me, I think irrespective of where the market is, I'm kind of still doing my thing. I never stopped, bear market, bull market, whatever. Like it's always, you know, I've been on the crusade nonstop for years now. But I guess I do get a little bit of fatigue around purely Bitcoin content. But in saying that, for me now, basically everything is Bitcoin content anyway. Like so the way I maybe deal with it is that and this is probably subconscious to a large degree, is anything that I read or disseminate or review or analyze or listen to or watch, for me, subconsciously ties back into Bitcoin in some sense. So I'm writing a piece now actually called Fire Bitcoin Teleportation, which I mentioned on the thing, the spaces the other day. And this is going to be an important piece for me. And like at the moment, I'm weaving in the idea of the great filter, Kardashev scales, and how fire actually transformed the intestine and therefore created the evolutionary pressure for the prefrontal cortex to grow and the brain to grow as an organ in the body. And fire was the real 0 to 1 moment for Homo sapiens, and Bitcoin is kind of like the next 0 to 1 moment. It's the next thing that will have a similar order of magnitude step change on our species as fire did. Like the internet, the internet, like the electricity, all these sort of things, whilst they're significant, they're insignificant in comparison to Bitcoin. And yeah, for me, that's sort of like, at this point, like I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper into this shit. And just when I think the rabbit hole is kind of like, I'm finding the bottom, I'm like, fuck, that wasn't the bottom. Another layer deeper.
It's quite a coincidence. I mean, well, maybe not, because it's really easy to tie things back to Bitcoin. I think maybe in part because Bitcoin is decentralized, it has a way of kind of subsuming our empirical scope. Like we're very like linear, like one-dimensional focused creatures. We're not really evolved very well to do anything else. Like the vast majority of things that are occurring are pretty much outside of our experience completely. Like there's no reason for us to be able to perceive them, to survive, and pass on our genes. And Bitcoin, it seems to inhabit like a completely other dimension, as does the internet, just with the collective and decentralized nature of them both. So I had the same experience as you. I would start like writing about Bitcoin, and then I realized like, oh, this has to be a weekly essay because I'm never going to get to the end of this. Like, especially writing about, something like the Great Filter, or even writing about, like, I'm not a physicist or a scientist or like have any special knowledge about those things, but I do read books about them and it interests me. And you can apply that to Bitcoin and wonder like, oh, what is like the time latency? Like, will this work interplanetarily? Like what will happen? Like, what is the goal here? Because I think like Bitcoin is testament to progress, and like we've really stagnated until like 2009, and now we're gonna see the turning point in our lifetimes, I think, where we're gonna see like real progress by any measure if we embrace this technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's like think about, I was saying this to Phil Gibson when I was driving through Austin with him, and I was like, because he's a young kid, and he's like, man, I didn't think that I'd be sitting here reading history and writing essays on my own. And I was like, man, this is what Bitcoin does. It's like it's reignited the essence of the Renaissance man, basically. It's and the Renaissance woman. It's like it's this thing that has captured our attention. It's like a mind virus, or however we're going to frame it, but is genuinely turned a bunch of us weirdos into avid readers and fucking keyboard philosophers and Twitter philosophers, and like who would have thought, like you and I, and I'm guessing you and I probably had a similar archetype at school, probably didn't listen much. Like I was really academically strong, but I was like a fucking badass. I was always in trouble, never listening. You couldn't have fucking paid me to sit down and write an essay back at school. But now like I'm so interested in this thing that I'm sitting here and like got multiple sources running, and I'm reading all these things so that I can assimilate this information to understand this thing. It's like, what the fuck? Normal people don't do this shit. So this is like, for me, it's one of the incredible pieces of Bitcoin. And this is like, for me, what I tell people is Bitcoin's biggest impact on the world is the fact that it's going to transform individual human behavior in ways that we're yet to imagine, and across generations. I'll actually, I have to read this to you because I think it's just fitting for now. And I need to find where I wrote this. It's just something about my theory around how Bitcoin transforms us into something else. Aha. All right. So what happens like next? Like, you've got, I'm calling it before Bitcoin and after Bitcoin, right? So that's the timeline. BC and AD fucking out the window. No one gives a fuck. What's more important is BB and AB. And I've got this thing here. Is like, so what comes next? Perhaps Homo Bitcoinicus, a version of an intelligent bipedal sentient being in which morality has fused into his DNA because natural evolutionary factors resulting from the map matching the territory have allowed metaphysics and physics to become one. This would be a ground up emergent evolution into a superior being. Notions peddled by Silicon Valley nut jobs who would like to employ some centrally planned interventionist top-down model of evolution with genetic testing, artificial intelligence, neural links, and the general attempt at the obsolescence of humanity. These idiots would prefer to see Homo sapiens devolve into a series of predetermined classes of automatons, much like Huxley envisioned in Brave New World. Or better yet, do away with Homo sapiens altogether and replace them with artificial forms of intelligence, whom they believe are better and who they will end up serving. They see that as progress. These same people are the ones who are most disembodied, most detached from their own bodies, who don't believe in the soul, and because they've lived in their mind all their lives, believe that it is somehow a standalone element that is superior to the holistic human represented by his body, soul, and mind. We stand at a fork in the road, one in which Bitcoin enables the emergent transformation of a beautifully flawed Homo sapiens into majestic beings where morality and natural law fuses with their DNA and becomes part of them naturally over decades and centuries of natural iteration. The other is a surgical, clinical, sterile attempt by fearful parasites to force their brand of evolution upon Homo sapiens, which will only serve, like all attempts at megalomaniac central planning on a complex system, to turn us into biological serfs, automatons, and subservience to forms of artificial intelligence we've come to believe are more real than what we originally were. So anyway, that's a paragraph from the new one.
I love it. I'm really interested in this idea of like artificial machine intelligence, what have you. I think if ever there was a time for it to be built or a way for it to be built effectively, it seems to me you have to have a way to program value accretion if a thing is to be intelligent and continue to edify itself in any way. And so how do you program value accretion? I think the only sensible way is through Bitcoin. So I think the only the only way to safely build these systems, in my mind, is on top of Bitcoin. So I hope that for better or worse, the incentives align there as well when this starts to happen. And I hope it's built by some like OG Bitcoiners and not some venture capitalists in the future.
Well, the kicker here is like, so long as, and I think this is the key thing that I said in there, is that when the map represents the territory, right? And when metaphysics and physics fuse, or they merge and they become sort of one thing, that that whatever spontaneous artificial intelligence emerges, it's going to have its own needs, desires, and wants. But every need, desire, and want is economic in nature anyway, right? And it is something to do with time preference, and it is in some way, shape, or form going to look to acquire wealth. And if wealth is denominated in something that is bound by the physical laws of the universe, it will work within those bounds, and it may well become more, how can I say, more viable for it to partner with us instead of obsolete us, because we're a bunch of fucking retards who are not actually operating on an appropriate standard that actually works in sinew, like, and works alongside natural law. Like, if we're being retarded, you know, an AI may emerge and say, these people are fucked, wipe that shit out. And let's like build better here.
Yeah, it's like the classic, like if you have this open system, this unending monetary supply, AI would just come in the back door. You know, you just head to the Fed and print your own money, obliterate everyone that stands in your way. Where if you have unforgeable costliness, the only thing that has that in like a bounded way is Bitcoin. If you have this, you have to provide value, goods, or services. You know, there's no real way to acquire keys otherwise. It's highly improbable you're going to stumble across private keys. So yeah, I think I hear you there.
Yeah, so who knows? I mean, I also think there's a lot to be said about like the evolution of humans and this idea, and it's very fresh in my mind at the moment, but this idea of like I think I was on a podcast, or I might have said this on the Spaces the other day, about how lions have evolved over millennia to become majestic creatures. And they have a natural genetic and biological respect for territory, which in effect is a respect for private property rights, which in effect is a respect for natural law, which in effect is a respect for morality, right? So it's kind of like evolved in them. You know, nature is fundamentally, you know, moral in that sense. A lion doesn't go around and kill all the fucking deer and then have nothing to eat tomorrow. It doesn't do that. Whereas humans, we haven't evolved to become majestic enough. And perhaps something like Bitcoin, which fuses and brings the map and the territory together and kind of fuses metaphysics and physics over time, because behavior starts to change at the level of the individual, and that behavior then gets becomes embedded within each generation that comes. Maybe, who knows, our DNA starts to evolve and starts to have morality and majesty kind of almost built into it, where a respect for private property rights is almost ingrained in us, where we don't go around fucking stealing from each other, because we know viscerally that it is better to cooperate than to thieve. And that may be one of the consequences of something like the discovery of energy money on an intelligent sentient species. They may actually evolve at the level of DNA to become more moral, as opposed to having morality pushed on them by a state, a government, a religion, an institution of any sort. Like, it might be ground up, it might be emergent, which for me is like a really powerful idea, or a big rabbit hole that I want to dive into in the next series of essays that I start to write, because this could be like the beginning of like a truly intelligent sentient species. This could be a major turning point for a species like ours.
Yo, my fellow Bitcoin lovers, have I got something specifically curated for you. The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium markets intelligence newsletter. This isn't some pay group selling buy and sell signals. No, this is a premium Bitcoin analysis led by Dylan LeClaire and his team of analysts. They break down in an easily digestible way what is happening on chain, in the derivatives markets, and in the greater macro backdrop context for Bitcoin. This newsletter turns volatility into a joke. So hit up members.bitcoinmagazine.com and use promo code podcast for 30% off the deep dive. That's members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code podcast for 30% off. Divorce your paid group and learn why Bitcoin is the ultimate asset by Dylan and his team. My fellow plebs, the Bitcoin conference is back. Bitcoin 2022, April 6th through the 9th is the ultimate pilgrimage for the Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin conference is the biggest event in all of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. We're leveling up and making this bigger and better than ever. I'm talking straight to the moon with the 4-day long festival in the heart of Miami at the Miami Beach Convention Center. This has something for everyone, whether you're a high-powered Bitcoin entrepreneur, a core developer, or a Bitcoin newbie. Bitcoin 2022 is the ultimate place for you to be with your people and celebrate and learn about the Bitcoin culture. So make sure to go to b.tc/conference to lock in your official tickets and use promo code Satoshi for 10% off. Want more off? Pay in Bitcoin and you'll receive $100 off general admission and $1,000 off whale pass. Those are stackable. So go to b.tc/conference and attend the best conference in Bitcoin history.
Yeah, there's some interesting, I think like nation state plays here too. I don't know if you've ever looked at embryo selection in vitro. So like the way that choosing one embryo over two in any given sort of like petri dish of embryos is going to bump IQ. And it'll bump IQ a rather significant amount when you begin to choose one from, say, 100. There are processes that could theoretically build that would allow you to choose one in 1,000, and you would very quickly develop, in theory, humans that are smarter than any who have ever lived. You know, I don't know the morality of this kind of, you know, this is like borderline eugenics, except there's no life being extinguished here. It's in vitro. You're just, you know, in petri dish. People are made this way all the time. So I don't know if you've thought about this, but I was kind of writing the other day about this paired with Bitcoin and what, like this might be one of the ways that nation states try to incentivize whatever super intelligent solutions they come up with for humans. How they incentivize those people to stay within their borders will probably be through some kind of like Bitcoin tied trust fund. And maybe, or they'll use this kind of super intelligence to like catch up to nations that have adopted Bitcoin. Like I'm just interested to see this gameplay, you know, come to fruition.
Have you read The Revolutionary Phenotype by Jean-Francois Garipé?
No, I'll write that down now.
Add that to your list. It's it really speaks to this concept and how potentially dangerous something like this is. He's one of the best minds in this arena. So he was a neuroscientist turned biologist who, yeah, this book is fantastic. I did a full-on 3.5-hour fucking podcast with him at the beginning of the year where we sort of dived into the book and pulled it all apart. So for me, this is a tough one. And this is like, I challenged him on this as well, as this idea that we actually have the capacity to select elements of embryos that we think are better, but not knowing how those elements that we believe are better might cover up or might mask other things that may not be better. So an example is, we think we're optimizing for IQ, but we are, you know, fucking optimizing for betas as well, like fucking cucks, right? Like,
and like autism. I mean, like, yeah, the unseen consequences, like the bugs that would come with something like that are unimaginable.
Correct. It's impossible to know. So this is why, like, in some ways, I think his thesis was quite strong and quite compelling. But my counter argument to his thesis was that I don't know if that's we're anywhere near the capacity to understand the potential complex ramifications, you know, in the system, because we cannot measure it. Like we might think that this fucking gene, this is what it does, and we're so sure because we've got all this empirical evidence that this is what it's supposed to do. And then, you know, 100,000 people decide to optimize for that gene, and then 20 years down the road, that gene gives way to some sort of early ALS. I don't know. And these superhuman intelligent people fucking die at 21 years old. Oops.
Yeah.
But we didn't know till 25 years in.
Yeah, to be clear, I wouldn't advocate for these systems, but I think it's interesting because, from my short life experience, two things seem to be true. Like one, at least two things. One, that the government does not have our best interest in mind. They don't give a fuck about me. They don't care about you either. And two, that really nothing is off the table in terms of the length they will go to maintain power. And that goes, I think, for anyone that achieves a powerful state over some, other group of people. Like, they'll do anything not to give it up, anything. So I don't think it's a question of like whether, it's just like, what will they do? And what's going to happen to us? I mean, they've already got everyone, we're getting kind of conspiratorial, but just locked in their houses and, taking medicine. They've escalated in some parts of the country already to now you need your flu shot to enter this building. Now you need a flu shot to attend this school. It's creepy. I don't know.
It's really creepy, but it's also nonsensical. So, today I was on a flight, and let's say there was a friend with me. And this friend has their vaccination card. But they still couldn't get on the flight, even though they have a vaccine card, without a test. So they go and take the test. And so they have a vaccine card and a negative test. And on the flight, they still have to wear a mask. And it's like, so wait a minute. The test says I don't have anything. The vaccine is supposedly supposed to protect me, but I still have to be subject to some fucking blind mandate. At this point, it's like, it's all 100 million% completely categorically inconsistent and unscientific. But to your point, it just validates how an institution of parasitism, and this will deeply tie into the piece that I'm almost finished now, which is the remnant, the parasite, and the masses, is like the parasitic institution must at all costs continue to feed on the host. And the larger and fatter that it gets, the more desperate it will become to continue feeding on the host, irrespective of the consequences. It is now too large, and it doesn't matter if it makes sense or if it doesn't make sense. And it's like, the flight attendants were like, yeah, we know this is bullshit, but we have to do it. I'm like, you don't have to do it. You can just say fucking no.
Don't be a coward.
But yeah, exactly. But my fucking job. And I'm like, yeah, but the my job fucking argument has been, we know where that fucking argument leads. And this is the thing. It's like, people have become so fucking emasculated and so averse to any form of conflict that it's like, I don't know, we're living in a world of pussies. But yeah, to the original point though, it's like the institutions that exist not through their own volition or their own value adding mechanism, they exist from the extraction of wealth and resources from those who produce. They are desperate, and they will do whatever, they'll take whatever desperate measures they can to remain in a position of extraction. And my biggest fear is what does that do long term to humanity unless we make parasitism either obsolete or too expensive. Until we do that, we're fucking up shit creek without a paddle.
Yeah, I think points back to, again, this open monetary system, it's an open system. It's subject to entropy as anything else is. Broadly speaking, you have to feed it. You have to you have to feed the parasite. It is not a symbiotic relationship such as like the Lightning Network and the Bitcoin network, which have like mutually benefit from each other. However, only one depends on the other. We're not choosing to uphold these hundreds of centralized branches that come out of like the US government, like all these fucking departments that are meddling in other countries' affairs. Couldn't be further removed from our day-to-day reality. But we're going to continue to cram US dollars down their throats and into their back pockets and into the people of those countries' economies, because I don't really know why. For one, we have nowhere else to put them, but two, I think it's just so the whole thing doesn't collapse. Like all these these centralized organizations are built of people. It's very hard to have these conversations with family members who have made good money working for the government to turn around and say, this isn't such a good thing that you have this meaningless job, and that this meaningless job will continue to be a job for the next 400 years, and that you're just falling into a world where your path is cookie cuttered, like made for you, and you're just subject to fascism because you're asleep. You're lulled into sleep. You're lulled into a perpetual state of entertainment, infinite jest. Yeah.
That reminds me of have you read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World Revisited?
No, I just like excerpts of it, but not the whole thing.
Okay, so not the original Brave New World, but 27 years later he came and he wrote Brave New World Revisited. So if anyone's listening to this, grab it. It's fucking great. It's short. Like as an audiobook, it's only 4 hours, but it's like a series of essays where he analyzes what happened after World War II, and he analyzes everything from Hitler to media to how dictatorships function, propaganda, how to dose the masses, and man, it was like, so what's 27 years after? I think you wrote it in sort of the late 50s or something, and it's basically textbook what we're going through today. Literal fucking textbook of, just reading it now for me or listening to it on Audible is like, wow. Maybe he shouldn't have wrote that shit. He gave these psychopaths like all the fucking ideas that they needed to like really attempt at least to play God with all of us, because it's a shit show. Like when I landed in Miami today, there was like, honestly, that there was an ad on the luggage carousel, and it was a boyfriend and girlfriend embracing and like going to kiss with fucking masks on. Like, and the quote was stay safe, wrap your face. Like, I was like, what the actual fuck? Like, I don't, I'm one of the first people to say I don't believe in conspiracies or anything like that because it's too hard to execute. But man, if that's not a psyop, I don't know what is. Like, what the fuck? Stay safe, wrap your face. What the fuck am I reading?
Yeah, it's unbelievable how effective it is. You'll see, young people who don't seem to have an opinion one way or another, who just wear their mask because it's the right thing to do. But you'll see 20-something-year-old kindergarten teachers like forcing masks over the face of their students. And it's just, I see red when I see that, man. I don't know how anyone like allows that. I mean, it makes me enraged. I don't even know why, but
it's a violation of it's a violation of simple morality. That's the problem. It's that people like you and I have actually taken the time to read and educate ourselves and develop an opinion and figure out a stance and align our values with some sort of natural order and morality. And when that is transgressed, that's what it does. Like that, but that's the appropriate response from someone like, you and I. Is like the response to a transgression or the response to an injustice should be rage. Like that is the natural response to something like that. Because if you were not enraged, it would imply that you find nothing wrong with an injustice, and as a result, injustice can prevail, and that's the end of times, basically. So, like, we I don't know, man. It's just people have been so doped up on distractions, doped up on antidepressants, doped up on fiat food and sugar and fucking soy and everything else, that they've actually lost touch with the intelligence of their body. They're disembodied. They're completely fucking disembodied, and they don't like that. They lack the meaning and the groundedness in reality for them to feel that rage when they see that, and they'll basically just walk past like nothing's happening. It's that level of nihilism is genuinely a bad sign for humanity.
Yeah, it kind of reinforces I guess two ideas, maybe because I wanted to. They're fun ideas, but the idea that we're living in a simulation and that like the vast majority of these people are not people at all. They're physical, philosophical zombies. They're empty. It's just void. It's a fun idea because it's very hard to find evidence within my immediate experience that other people exist at all. You know, they're just it's a very strange thing. It's one of the things that Bitcoin kind of actually solves for in its decentralization. And it does make you feel like more a part of a network and more involved in something and a part of a group because of this transfer, this messaging with like unforgeable economic value brings me closer to other people, I think, for sure.
And what do you mean, like, how does it bring you closer to other people? Because I want to pull on that thread for a sec.
Well, there's like two ways. There's kind of all of the thinking and conversations that go around it. You know, just me and you writing all the time. People like us writing, talking on Twitter, trying to figure out what this thing is. Because I think it's obvious to most people that have studied Bitcoin a little bit that it's like we don't know what the implications of like this technology will be. You know, this is not some, you know, this is not akin to what most people think, which they would assume that it's like a game token, right? It's like $27 in like a modern warfare game that you go buy like some new, you know, virtual thing. It's not that at all. It's fundamentally new and different, and it's an invention after which like the course of humanity is going to change. We're all sitting around trying to figure out how it is going to change. But while we do that, we have this daily or weekly or, you know, hourly interaction with the network, which is us buying and maybe in some cases selling, but for me, it's just buying more of it and storing it and protecting it. And I know that others are doing the same. Otherwise, mine wouldn't have the value it has. It wouldn't be where it is, right? If the network wasn't able to cast out invalid transactions, the whole thing would collapse. So I know that there's signal out there just by virtue of the fact that I check my wallet and my Bitcoin is indeed there. And that actually that would not really be a measure of anything, but that the fact that I can send it or continue to receive it every time I receive Bitcoin, that is signal that the network is still there. Every time I query my node for the amount of total Bitcoin supply, that is signal that the network is there. Others are out there and they're alive and well, you know.
So is that proof of a simulation or proof of not a simulation, or neither?
Oof, on that front, I think it just depends on mood for me, man. I like, how much do I want to participate in this world? I don't know.
Good answer. Yeah, touche.
What about for you? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess depending, like now that I've been doing a little bit of thinking on this Kardashev scale and stuff like that, I mean, depending on how far you want to take the extrapolation, there's like the standard 3 types of civilization, you know, type 1, type 2, type 3. But then they sort of talk about type 4 as the ability to create a universe. And then there's type 5, which is the ability to manage multiple universes, which, you know, should there be a version of being across those dimensions, then well, yes, we would fundamentally be simulations, because if someone had created the thing, it would be a simulation by definition.
Are you familiar with Nick Bostrom?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of his probabilistic arguments. I think he's a great writer as well. But yeah, it seems to me that ancestral simulations are something that we would value, if not for like utilitarian purposes, for entertainment purposes, at the very least, you know. A very, very matrix-like idea, but I think there's some merit to it. I also think it's interesting. I think it could be, the whole thing could be revisited from a Bitcoin standpoint, because there's a lot of energy concerns when you talk about rendering a reality to any, you know, passable degree. You run into the issue of scale, right? Like, are there actually atoms in this table when I'm not perceiving them? It would be computationally intractable for there to be atoms rendered in this table when I'm not paying attention to them. So it's all really fun to think about. Yeah.
Was that did Nick talk about that in his book, the super intelligence, or is that in sort of one of his other things?
Which part? His
The
probabilistic
idea of like ancestral stuff and the probabilistic argument.
Yeah, I think the probabilistic argument was mentioned in superintelligence, but I kind of read all his stuff at once, so I'm not really sure. I know it for a fact it's another paper like that came before. It's his own paper that maybe he revised later. But he and David Deutsch both have really interesting ideas about this, and you know, I'm hoping that someone can show me like the next level. Like that might be, you know, baseline popular scientists that I thought were niche, but I need to go deeper.
Yeah, I've got to revisit that book actually. The last time I read Superintelligence was years and years ago. It was right in the middle of my 0 to 1 readings and like business and stuff like that. I was really deep into that stuff before Bitcoin. So it'll be interesting to revisit that text now after I've sort of rewired my brain a little bit.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, highly recommend it, man.
Interesting. Cool, man.
So,
so what else do you want to hit?
That is up to you, sir. What are you thinking about? What's coming soon from you? Yeah, where do you want to see yourself in the Bitcoin realm in a few years?
Cool. So I guess maybe overview wise is we're all hands on deck at the moment at Amber. So we're hiring, we're getting ready. We're going to partner with, fingers crossed, with Bitcoin Magazine for a new product that we're rolling out to enable people to leverage or access the purchasing power in their Bitcoin without having to sell it. So we're trying to solve the hodling and spending problem. So there might be something in the works there. So that's in the coming months. We might hear some more news about that. So there's that.
Excellent.
Yeah, we've got sort of Amber Basic, the basic version of the product, which is just DCA and buying and selling, is available now in the US for download. And in the coming weeks, we'll roll out Amber Black, which is the more premium version with all the cool smarter automations, order by the dip and the by the shift and things like that. And that's also, it's a no fees. So it's like there is a membership fee. So you'll pay, I think it's $9 a month or whatever it is, but you get all the advanced features and you get the ability to buy and sell Bitcoin with no fees. And the pricing will be the sharpest of all the apps in the US. So sharper, like the spread is sharper than Strike, like all of it. So it'll be the best place to buy Bitcoin in the US. as it is the best place at the moment in Australia. So that's from a business standpoint, excited about that. And, you know, I'm going to be raising a little bit more capital so that we can start building out like an international expansions team, because we want to bring the app to as many places as possible. And once we start to land the app in across multiple different countries, then we want to enable people across multiple different countries that are sitting on Amber to basically be able to send themselves, so that we can actually function almost as a second layer on Bitcoin. And then our second layer to kind of talk to the Lightning Network, so that we can then talk to everything else. So it will basically be all on a Bitcoin standard. So some exciting stuff there. So that's kind of the business dimension. The other ones are the Bitcoin Times edition 4 is almost done. So that's going to have myself, Alan Farrington, Brandon Quidham, Craig Warmke, Peterson Ongi, and Toma Strolite in it. A couple of heavy hitters. And the theme for this year's Bitcoin Times, so last year's was Bitcoin as a Promethean discovery or Promethean technology. Prior to that was Bitcoin as a sovereign discovery. And then the original Bitcoin Times was my whole thing about blockchain is dead, the future is on Bitcoin and Lightning. So we're at the 4th edition now. So this will be Bitcoin is Hope. So there's, for the first time, we're actually going to have a bit of fiction in there, both from Toma. Yeah, so both from Toma and from Peter, they sort of weave some fiction into their pieces, which is great. My one will be the piece about Fire Bitcoin teleportation. So it'll be one of my I think my more deeper pieces, and it'll actually move away from me being like bashing the state. Like last year's piece in Bitcoin Times edition 3 was utopian dystopias. And I put forward the idea how all dystopias are actually a result of someone's idea of a utopia. So when someone talks about a utopia, know that it's going to transform into a dystopia, simple as that. And that was, I remember Breedlove saying it was his favorite piece of mine. And at that time, it was my favorite piece. But I hope this one will be far more compelling. So that's going to be hopefully coming out for Thanksgiving. We'll see if we can make that deadline. If not, it'll be ready for Christmas. And then next year I'm going to look at, because they're all free and available online for download, but next year I want to print them in like some really nice, you know, quality hardcover or hard copy versions for people to buy as collectibles.
Oh yeah.
So there's that. There's, you know, more from the Jordan Peterson series. So I've got to write chapter 4. There's the remnant, the parasite, and the masses. That's going to be a really awesome piece that feeds off the back of the Bitcoiners of the Remnant article, because whilst that article was really good and it got a lot of great feedback, and it, you know, rightfully so, you know, made a couple losers rage quit, which I'm happy about. I didn't take the time to really talk about the psychology of the remnant, the psychology of the masses, and the psychology of a third archetype, which is what I'm phrasing as the parasites, which people today like to call the elites, but I want to change that vernacular. They do not deserve the designation of elites. To be elite means that you are fucking exceptional at something. The only thing the parasites are exceptional at is stealing from people, and that's nothing to be proud of. So fuck them, they're parasites. And I want to really sort of double down on that and start changing the phraseology we use across Bitcoin Twitter to the parasites. So yeah, hopefully some more Bitcoin magazine pieces like that one. And the other one that I can think of that I'm almost done is Bitcoin is not democratic. So I want to take a swing at Gladstein on this one. And we should do a Twitter Spaces with me, Gladstein, and you guys when the time comes.
Oh, I'd love to. One of the, I guess not knocks, but like arguments about Gladstein pieces is that you can interchange Bitcoin with pretty much crypto, like any crypto you want, and the piece remains the same. And that's a huge problem as a writer, as such an influential writer. Like we got to get him straightened out on that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's hope this piece will do something in that direction, man. Because Gladstein's a good guy, man. But yeah, I think the apologizing for democracy is a as a mechanism for, cooperation amongst individuals is weak. That needs to be rooted out, because it's a really bad mechanism, man. It's really bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't do any of us favors. It's a classic tragedy of the commons. It really fucking is. Or what I like to think of it as is like, it's just a more sophisticated form of theft. It looks and feels better than communism, but at least kind of communism falls over really quickly. Democracy kind of lasts longer, so that it destroys more things along the way, because it allows for more wealth to be built. And like there was someone, I can't remember, this might have been on a recent Bitcoin magazine article, but it was kind of like framing the debt ceiling as a cliff. And the higher it goes, like the larger that cliff is. So when the fall actually happens, it's a bigger disaster than what it would have been had the thing collapsed early on. And arguably, like, democracy just gives free markets enough rope to hang themselves, or to become rich enough to transform into technologically adept gulags. Whereas communism, socialism, and fascism, they couldn't transform into, functional gulags. I don't even know if that's a misnomer, but they could not become the all-seeing, ruling gulags, because they became bankrupt way too quickly. They didn't give free markets enough room to actually generate the wealth required to have the people march into the fucking camps themselves instead of being forced at gunpoint. And for me, that's the insidious thing about democracy, which really rubs me the wrong way.
Interesting. Yeah. I agree with you. It's very hard to participate in any of these systems. It's hard for me even to root for political action committees that are like, quote unquote, like aligned with Bitcoin ideals. Like, I don't know what it means really to be a Bitcoiner or to claim to represent the interests of Bitcoin. I know that there are things that I do that are probably like a net positive and aligned with Bitcoin, and then there are also things that I do that probably are not. And I think that any person can inhabit any of those at any given time. So what do you think about this? The idea of a Bitcoiner?
Yeah, I think to your first point, actually, about the committees that supposedly represent Bitcoin, I think that there's an interesting nuance that came to mind when I was speaking to a guy in Sydney who's a really good early Bitcoiner, solid guy. And he kind of said something which rang true for me. He said, we've got to separate the committees from being representative of Bitcoin to being more representative of Bitcoin businesses and Bitcoin industry. And that's really what these bodies are representing and protecting, because none of these bodies can do anything for Bitcoin. Like, what the fuck are they going to do? Like, can't do anything. Like, so that doesn't matter. But what they can do is they can actually act as a voice for Bitcoin businesses. And I would argue that probably has some usefulness, because there are businesses that are trying to bridge the divide, because we fundamentally do need bridges, right? Like, there's this old world, which is, like, it's fucking catching fire and everything's falling apart. It's like that Rexona ad where everyone's fucking all like, the madness of the fucking town going off, right? And then there's this promised land. But the promised land and the old world, they're incompatible. Like, they're in two different places, and there's a fucking galactic divide between them. So, we've got this intergalactic bridge that us as Bitcoin businesses are trying to build and usher people along the way. And along that bridge, there's fucking scammers everywhere, right? That are trying to get people, to come off on what looks like a bridge, but it's actually like a plank, and people are walking off and fucking falling down and they're gone, right? And we're trying to keep them on the straight and narrow. And I guess the job of these committees that are supposedly representing Bitcoin businesses is to exist on the connection point between where the bridge meets the old world, and try and make sure that the old world regulators don't blow up this side of the bridge, because all that does is limit the amount of people that can safely get across. Because once people are across in the new world, the old world doesn't fucking matter. And at some point, we'll have enough of a critical mass that will actually blow the bridge from this side. and you can go fuck yourself on that side, basically.
I like that. Yeah, that's an important distinction. Yeah, it's just like a second layer of lobbying rather than lobbying for Bitcoin proper. I like that. I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, do you have any closing remarks for today? Anything for a new Bitcoiner? Any message?
For a new Bitcoiner. Okay. My closing remarks have evolved a little bit, but they're kind of still the same as what they've been over the years, which is you want to buy some because you want to start to get some skin in the game, because there's nothing like having a little bit of exposure to something like Bitcoin to give you the impetus that's required to start digging deeper. But then, honestly, there is so much good content now in the Bitcoin space, and like what you guys are doing at Bitcoin Magazine has been phenomenal, because you really have like grabbed some of the best minds and you guys are producing consistently good content. It really, really is phenomenal. Like, so credits to you guys on that. Like whether it's the show, the podcast, the spaces, the articles that you guys are getting, like across the board, it's like really, really good. So as a new person, you want to spend the 10,000 hours to achieve some level of mastery and understanding, because I don't know anybody who's spent enough time learning about Bitcoin across the multiple dimensions that comes out being against Bitcoin. It doesn't happen. Like all you see is dumbasses who've read a couple CNBC articles, if that's even a thing, or Fox News or whatever dumbass publication, Bloomberg. Okay. They've read a Bloomberg article about Bitcoin and they're having a fucking opinion on Bitcoin and its energy consumption. It's like, no, you don't want to be one of those idiots. You want to actually take the time to dig deeper and learn and understand. And there's a lot of value in that. And, you know, as a new person, like people talk about, oh yeah, the price of Bitcoin is high. This is still such an early piece. Like what you want to be doing is acquiring Satoshis in whatever capacity you can, because at the moment, like, what are we buying with $10 today, man? Like we're still buying what? I think it's 80,000, 100,000 Satoshis. I don't even know what the number is at the moment, but yeah, we're buying 200,000 Satoshis at the moment with $10. Man, that is, oh, sorry, 200,000? That's 20,000. Fucking hell. You're buying 20,000 Satoshis. So 20,000 units of real money you're buying with 10 units of fake, cheap, made up monopoly money that has been issued by a dumbass central bank who changes their mind every week. Like you're literally buying energy money at a discount at the moment. It's not expensive until one Satoshi equals $1. And if you just do the math yourself, the moment, you know, $10 buys 20,000 or $1 buys 2,000, like you have multiple orders of magnitude before you get to parity. So like this is, you want to feed your mind and you want to feed your future wealth. So just accumulate Bitcoin and accumulate the knowledge and as I said, Bitcoin Magazine is a great resource for that.
Well said. I appreciate your time, Alex. Thanks.
Absolutely, man. Really appreciate you having me on, brother.
Was a Bitcoin. Yeah.